Hello, I'm Delphine. I'm 33, which some call the Jesus year, so I'm totally going to roll with that. And today I'm going to be speaking about our higher call to purity. Basically redefining purity in today's modern culture. Let's try and do it. So around 3 years ago, I had a very radical reversion back to my faith. I'd always called myself a Catholic, but I was very much a cafeteria Catholic, meaning I was picking and choosing what I wanted to believe and what I wanted to do and reflect in my life. By the grace of God, I was really shown so much truth, the objective truth, God's truth, and it just really made me make my wonky path straight. Something that really resonated with me was Jesus's beatitude about being pure in heart. I really loved that, and for ages I was praying like, God, please help me to be pure in heart. And it gave me this idea, okay, what does that mean? What does purity really mean? So obviously, me being quite geeky when it comes to theology, I looked into this. So first of all, the definition of purity means freedom from adulteration or contamination, which I like that. It's like setting apart, you know, you want to be set apart. And obviously the beatitude itself is, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. I want to see God. I was looking at the etymology of beatitude because it actually comes from a Latin word that means blessed. In the English dictionary, it's noted as state of utmost bliss, which, you know, makes sense as well. And for me, my simple brain, I'm like, a beatitude, a beautiful attitude, which I like as well because, you know, I can look at that sermon and think, okay, how can I grow in this? How can I grow in this virtue? So, purity, what does it actually mean? Because I don't want to just be talking about chastity, or of course we talked earlier about why sex is for marriage and modesty and the way we dress, but purity in general, I think it really is this act of setting ourselves apart. And the thing I really noticed when I really converted back to my faith, and I'm sure I'm going to be converting back like my entire life, is when I put Christ at the centre of everything, it makes me quite countercultural. Like, I'm not saying the popular things, I'm not just going with the whole you do you kind of culture. I have God's objective truth and I stand by that. And how much simpler does that make life? Because when we talk about relativism and people thinking that they're their own gods, it's just a mess, it's just chaos. So for me, I really love having these objective truths. I also started thinking about driving. Now stick with me here, I love an analogy. So when you're driving, the first things that your instructor will tell you is that your hands go where your eyes go. And I feel like this applies to real life as well. Like what we consume, what we kind of take in, what we read, what we watch, it can start to change and alter what we think is okay, and it also desensitizes us and stuff like that. And you by no means need to be as extreme as me, because I think I was a bit extra when I did this, but I got rid of my TV. A, because I actually prefer my flat without a TV. B, it's cheaper without a TV license, but also mainly because I saw watching TV as a near occasion of sin for me, only because like so much of the content there was either very like lust-worthy, or it was all about greed or violence, and I was like, I do not need to be putting this in my brain. I've got too many things to do already to waste time, and I am like a chief procrastinator, so it's been really good for me. But it really reminded me of that Matthew scripture that is about how our eyes are the lamp of the soul. And I think in this term of calling ourselves to higher purity, it means like reducing the contamination, if we're going back to that definition, of what we are consuming and what we're associating with. So 2 Bible verses that I really wanted to highlight about, you know, setting our mind on what is godly and pure and nothing else is in Colossians, Paul says to always set our minds on the above. And then Paul continues in Philippians saying, focus on what is lovely, true and noble. So for me, I was like, ugh, I need to put away my like true crime hobbies and all these things, because for me personally, I found it it wasn't bringing me any closer to God. It wasn't bringing me any peace or anything like that. When I said true crime hobby, I just want you guys to know that I do not commit any crimes. What I meant was I did get lost in that kind of podcast, you know, listening to these true crime stories and getting really paranoid and walking down the street like, ugh. Yeah, I have really found it a lot easier to have a stronger faith life when I've been less worldly and less kind of plugged into that stuff. And it is difficult. It makes talking with colleagues and stuff like impossible, because they're like, have you seen this show? And I'm like, I don't have a TV. So it's definitely not easy. And I think this concept I mentioned before about being countercultural and just not being of this world. And, you know, my first year of my conversion, I really was very fixated on this word transformation. Like, God really put transformation in my heart, in my soul, and I kept reading Romans 12:2, which is, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing and perfect will. Giving up my own self-reliance, actually, you know, truly following God's will and not just my own will, it's probably going to be a lifelong struggle, like, let's be honest about it. Having traditional values in a postmodern world is difficult. Having objective truths, you know, not just going with the whole you do you relativism, is tricky, and it doesn't make you popular. And anytime I end up in a discussion like this or a debate, I try not to get into confrontations. I'm terrible at them. But I go to John and I read the verse which says, do not love this world, nor the things it offers you. For when you love the world, you do not have the love of the Father in you. Ouch! As a Catholic, I regularly attend confession. So confession is, you go into a confessional in like a mini box, and you can't see the priest can't see you, and you can tell him everything that you've been struggling with. And it doesn't need to be like big mortal sins. Like, it can be things like me saying, I didn't stand up for my faith today because I wanted to be liked, or I put the opinion of man above the opinion of God, or today I was scrolling down Instagram and I felt really envious, like I actually felt, you know, that jealousy and envy of someone else's joy. And what I love about confession is it's like mini spiritual direction. You get guidance and counsel, and you get words of, you know, strength and affirmation that can really help you to move forward and to try and overcome these struggles, because it's really difficult. And, you know, I know this especially because I lived a very secular life, you know, like I didn't really think about anything more than just the day-to-day. It was very self-centered, very egocentric and not theocentric. And how I do this is in constant transformation. It's every day choosing to follow God's will, not mine, not the world's. And I think in order to truly conform ourselves to God's will, we need to fill our minds with what is true, good and noble, and just let it wash over us. Because I read somewhere that, you know, it's one thing to strive to be a saint, to, you know, go to heaven one day. It's another thing to be striving sufficiently. And I think the difference there is amazing, because one of them's like, oh, I really hope I go to heaven, and I really hope like I do God's will and glorify his kingdom. And the other one isn't just a hope, it's like putting those words into action. Something I want to debunk is this idea of Catholic guilt or Christian guilt, you know, that we kind of live our lives according to these rules. Because I don't see them as rules, I see them as like guardrails that are given to us by a very loving Father. Because at the end of the day, like, if you are going 100 miles per hour down a motorway and you don't have these kind of railings or like the lane markings, you're just gonna go off and it's gonna be a car crash, literally. So, you know, God has put these in place for us so that we just know what is right from wrong and what is true and what is not true. At the end of the day, knowing that God is my Father and he is watching over everything, and he's, you know, putting things in my path, taking things away. You know, I love the saying that the world's rejection is God's redirection, because he knows what he's doing, even in our pain and our suffering. Like, if you look at it in the story of our salvation, it'll make sense. It will be like this amazing puzzle, like 100 million piece puzzle, that we'll see one day and we'll realize it all makes sense. So, as a single person, how can we live this call to purity? I think it's about having a very healthy and balanced approach to things. You know, for example, sometimes I might be walking down the street and I see a very handsome man and I think, oh, he's handsome. And then before I let myself go like, I'm going to turn this potentially lustful thought into appreciation, and I'll say, God, you did very well creating that man. So, you know, just trying to understand that it isn't easy. It isn't easy to, you know, take our thoughts captive and to ensure that they are in line with Christ, in line with God. But it's something that I think is like a muscle, so we just try and do it over and over again. Another thing I like to think is having conviction over condemnation. So, you know, we all fall into sin. We all do things, you know, even the Bible says, right, Paul's like, why do I do what I don't want to do and I don't do what I do want to do? Like, the human heart is just, well, all kinds of broken. So I think for that reason, you know, never feel condemned, because God doesn't condemn you, He forgives us. But we have to obviously be repentful and genuinely want to do better. And we can do this by praying for God's grace, for asking God's grace, God, please give me the grace to get over this problem. Give me the grace to improve in this virtue. And you know, that's what I'm doing pretty much every moment. I'm like, give me the grace. So I think it's really important to feel convicted, not to feel condemned, and to just have a checklist in your current lifestyle. Is there something, is there someone, is there some TV show or anything like that that is causing me to sin, or that's taking me away from God? And if you can, you know, get rid of those in your life, it's going to be so much easier to pursue in the path to holiness with God's guardrails in place, so that we stay safe and we can stay on the right track. I often say a prayer which is, God, please help me to do things for your glory, not for my own glory. Because pride is something I massively struggle with, and pride was the devil's sin, so don't want to fall into that. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. Please leave a comment, a like, a dislike, whatever you think. And for more Christian lifestyle and dating content, please subscribe to Salt. Okay, bye.